Here in the AI era, things are inexact, so you have more of this kind of vibe coding and other pieces, and also the spread is now away from computer science. A lot of people are wondering what will happen to jobs and to the shape of work as we get to a more of a post-AI era, or I would say an AI-adopted era. I wouldn't call it post-AI. If a lot of the white-collar jobs eventually get automated, what does that mean?
Yeah.
There is an element of upskilling. People can say, okay, now I'm more powerful. Instead of me having to instruct people, I can instruct computers, and computers are cheaper, and they can do things overnight, and they can do automated tasks quickly. That'll make people, I think, more entrepreneurial. So before, if you wanted to start a company and you had an idea, you had to find people to do that.
Yeah.
And for a smaller country like Nepal, that will bring a whole number of people who will be empowered in ways that they were not before.
Yeah. Welcome, Manu. Welcome to Nepal and welcome to Post AI Nation. The primary reason we are doing this podcast and the conversations around it is that in Nepal, it's a very small community, but then talks around AI and the capability development around AI are happening in pockets, and they're not really coming to in one place where we can talk about it more, learn from each other more, and spread the awareness in the ecosystem, because technology is moving very fast, and then I think it's time for us to come together and then build something together. Like there's going to be a lot of learning as well, but then it's just a lot of sharing with each other on what we have. The talk that you gave at AI Conf, there was so much to learn from there, just because you have built technology in multiple eras, I would say, and then two successful exits. So very excited to have this conversation, and thank you so much for making time in a very short schedule to have this conversation with us. I just want to dive very quickly into one of the biggest questions that I have in my head about Nepal's tech ecosystem. We are primarily a ecosystem in technology where we are building technology for Western markets. That is what we are doing. With AI, I think that is getting challenged a lot. Do you see that to be a problem, being VP of AI in Leapfrog? Do you see that to be a problem? Do we still have capabilities so that we can actually secrete value in the post-AI ecosystem? Any thoughts you would have in that direction?
Well, I think many people are thinking about that, not just in the country of Nepal, but in many other countries. What is the impact of AI? And I think to answer that question, we have to kind of step back a little. There have been many transformations in computer science that tried to make computer technology, which could do things like number crunching and other kinds of manufacturing automation, more efficient for humans to use. So there's been several waves of these. One was in the 60s. It was kind of machine language to assembly language. Then we had one with the C language, Fortran era, kind of now it's easier to write things in the problem domain. Then we had the scripting language. It would kind of compress a lot of the time a developer spent developing. And those all improved developer time efficiency. Now with the AI era, you can effectively instruct a machine in plain language to do things. But unlike those other eras, two other things are different. One is the resolution of whatever you wrote in, say, Python or C or whatever. It was very exact. A format would be followed, and it was a computer-centric thing. Here in the AI era, things are inexact, so you have more of this kind of vibe coding and other pieces. And also the spread is now away from computer science, right? So we're seeing impact across other industries. It's not just a computer efficiency issue. Now, a lot of people are wondering what will happen to jobs and to the shape of work as we get to a more of a post-AI era, or I would say an AI-adopted era. I wouldn't call it post-AI. And a few things are clear. Some things are going to be very difficult to AIify. If you are in the skilled trades, electrician or plumber or anything like this, no doubt. Well, skilled surgeon. Other things, if you're in white-collar work. So if you have I would call it digital inputs and digital outputs kind of job. So if you take tax forms and you do something with them and you output them.
Yeah.
The input is computer generated stuff and the output, that's ripe for AI adoption. And then there are other things that are related to kind of AI adoption that are, I think, not Nepal centric. I think it's mostly all over the world. It's like, well, if a lot of the white collar jobs eventually get automated, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And I think there is an element of upskilling. People can say, okay, now I'm more powerful. Instead of me having to instruct people, I can instruct computers, and computers are cheaper and they can do things overnight and they can do automated tasks quickly. That'll make people, I think, more entrepreneurial. So before, if you wanted to start a company and you had an idea, you had to find people to do that.
Yeah.
So it might not be comfortable for people who've been workers at larger companies all their whole lives, but it will open up a new era of you can do it yourself because you'll be able to trust your website to be written, your software to be written, the interface to other places to be written. And for a smaller country like Nepal, that will bring a whole number of people who will be empowered in ways that they were not before.
Yeah.
For older established companies, there'll be a pressure to get more out of their workforce. There will probably be layoffs, and there will be definitely sectors that are impacted more than others. Now, what that means for Nepal servicing Western markets, I think Western markets are going to find that at least for the next few years, AI can only do so much, and you still need to have a human piloting the work activity. And so for those, there'll be probably, again, pressure to use offshore labor.
Yeah.
So that might buffer Nepal,
Okay.
India, and a few of these places in areas of development, but less so in places like call centers, where it'll be almost full automation.
Yeah. The other reality that we definitely see here in Nepal is that the tech companies, large tech companies that we have here, like Leapfrog, they're having to do their own version of education to make the workforce here ready. And as and when the things are moving so fast, if academia here in the country was not able to produce the kind of output that the global companies want, that delta is going to increase by multiple folds. How do you see that transition for a company like Leapfrog and similar companies which are working with global clients and have a global work output? How do you see that transition?
So at Leapfrog, as the VP of AI, I also run our AI Center of Excellence. And there's a few things there. One is we try to hire engineers who are skilled with AI. Originally, we tried to pick up engineers who had some machine learning experience, where they would train on some problem like recommendation engines or other types of things where you would have look at sample data, run the machine learning algorithm, they would learn a pattern. That isn't really the same in generative AI because the workflow is not really about teaching a machine with examples. It's taking a pre-built model and deploying it in some way. So in Leapfrog, there's kind of two tracks, and we invest heavily in training. So we're training all of our engineers in both of these ways. The first way is how to be yourself more productive. This means you're using tools like today GitHub Copilot or Claude Code or Figma Make or Lovable. These are things that amplify your individual power, but in a large workforce, we can't have everybody using different tools, because if we want to switch people across projects, we need to have some uniformity. So we invest in training, we invest in those tools, and we give them to all those employees and help them learn to adopt that. The second track, which is how do you use AI in the customer's environment? So this isn't so much about your own personal productivity, but it's about when you deploy an LLM for a customer for a chatbot, will it hallucinate? Does it need RAG or other kinds of recall mechanisms so it can query a database? So that's the first course we offer. All the engineers are taking that, and that's a Leapfrog internal thing. We have a second course that we'll be offering this year. Again, we're going to roll that across the workforce, which is how to do agentic workflows. This means that you can take the output of some chat or some other thing that would be a simpler workflow and run it against kind of more traditional software automation. There's many, a phase A, a phase B, a phase C that has to be repeated many, many times because the customer is maybe a financial institution running at scale. And so learning to do that in a reliable way is something we take some time to teach our engineers. I think the training we get from the outside is uneven for that.
Okay. So when we come to the other side, when you look at the clients, everyone is sort of figuring out what would be the best use of AI adoption, like how workflows are going to change, how business logics are going to change. How has the communication been with clients, and how ready do you think the global ecosystem right now is? What are they thinking in terms of how do they deploy AI into their workflows or their organizations or business logic?
It's really widespread.
Okay.
There is a huge amount of curiosity. I would say every single client we talked to in the last 6 months for sure, probably the last year and a half,
Yeah.
mentioned AI and how we can add AI to their business.
Mhm.
Many of them, depending on where they're at, are more curious. They're like, okay, let's do a pilot.
Mhm.
Um, I think a few of them have suffered from, I'll say, naive implementations,
Okay.
where someone, like, let's say they make a chatbot for help,
Mhm.
and you put that on the website, and the chatbot is not well grounded, and so it hallucinates, and so then there's a poor experience.
Mhm.
Uh, we caution that, we are very active to prevent that. For example, we have a customer that does medical records processing. It literally takes 4,000 page records.
Mhm.
That's much larger than any LLM can process in
Yeah.
one shot. So the magic is in how to cut that up into enough small pieces
Mhm.
and ground each of those pieces and then roll up the whole result so you can actually query a medical case.
Yeah.
And you can say really esoteric things like,
Mhm.
in the heart where the hole was found, and you put in a device and it popped out and migrated, was that a good choice of size? So now you need to know things about cardiology. You need to know things about what was done in the case. You need
Yeah.
to know what best practices are. And so we've done that. And so, but that took some time
Mhm.
because while the LLMs are masterful at taking kind of mushy data or
Yeah.
text, they still need a lot of grounding with other, I would say, more traditional software.
Okay. Uh, the so we work with lot of legacy organizations right now, and I think this gives a very good lead into how should organizations think, especially on the leadership. So just narrating a scenario. So a large organization, 2,000, 3,000 people, big or legacy organizations, financial institutions or non-financial institutions. There is the board of the organization, and then there is the technical team of the organization. Now there is so much of I want to implement AI in the ecosystem, that there is a conversation that is happening from the leadership to the technical team that you need to apply AI. And then there is a loop that is getting formed over there where there is not enough capability in the technical teams to implement AI. And there is some, as you said, naive implementation of AI in multiple sectors.
Yeah.
So when we look at legacy organizations, now, what would you recommend to leaders of large legacy organizations on how they should structure their AI adoption moving in 2026 and forward?
So, I think AI is more of a technique than it is a particular feature.
Yeah.
So when we talk with these organizations, we really ask them more about business use cases.
Yeah.
Maybe you have customer support. And if you have customer support, then there's a greeting process. Oh, hello, Mr. Chatterjee. What are your problems? And then, there's some back and forth. And then eventually we want to be in a situation where we have my specific information.
Yeah.
Obviously, if I call back a week later, I'm going to get a different person and all this kind of stuff. Or if I go back to the website, the chatbot will forgotten who I am.
Yeah.
So some of the magic is, can you make that more personal? Because you can mix the generic LLM capability to have conversational dialogue with customer-specific information so they don't have to repeat themselves. This kind of stuff is obvious. Like you would, if you have a call center, you would have somebody as a screen in front of them, but it's not the same as it just knows. And so these kind of things, I would talk to some of these larger companies and say, this is the kind of stuff where you would always wanted it. And so don't worry about the LM and the AI and all this other technology part.
Yeah.
Is this the use case that you want to solve? If you are looking at knowledge bases, before you would have, basically an index, and you would type in the keyword and you would find the relevant part or the relevant catalog or this. Now you can tell the AI, I want to find this and not this.
Yeah.
And it'll translate that into the appropriate underlying software techniques. These things are the kind of low-hanging fruit where you don't have to touch really difficult systems. And you can test AI and get a very good result.
Yeah.
And it has high value. It often allows you to focus your workforce on other things. So that's where I tell them to start. And there may be internal use cases. We have many clients with internal use cases where the workflow can be improved.
One of the things that we see people having different experience is that So I'm a leader of an organization, and my organization has a AI adoption journey. And I, as a person, have an AI adoption journey. I'm starting to use it for almost everything that I do, like especially digitally. And then my organization is at some level. And what I've seen in spaces is that there is a big gap between those two journeys, and that creating some form of restlessness on how could AI be implemented. Now, so when we look at the personal journeys of leaders of especially large organizations, how could they see AI? How could they better understand the technology? As you mentioned, we should see it from a business logic point of view. But then how can the personal journey also be a lot more grounded and not just using tools, and then this the capability of the tools getting reinforced into what they would want out of the organization system as well?
So I think for many of us, even within our own workforce, people have their own private AI subscriptions to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever they have. One of the key things is within the company, we want them to use our subscribed version of that.
Yeah.
It's not so much that they'll be different than what they would buy on their own, but as an enterprise customer under our umbrella, there is the data is more private, it is controlled by us, and so that allows us to protect our customers better. And we're very transparent with our workforce that we're not trying to constrain the tools you use, but we do need you to play by that because the agreements we have with our customers,
Yeah.
our engineering teams must be enforced. That said, and as I mentioned earlier, we kind of had like these two tracks of
Yeah.
training in our company, and I imagine we will see that emerge in other companies of scale as well, which is how do I make workers more productive? So for some, it's something like coding tools.
Yeah.
For others, actually ChatGPT, Claude Work, which came out, some of these other, which allow you to make a project, or
Yeah.
Microsoft Copilot, where you can have automation of PowerPoints. And these are huge, right? You can take a small outline, flesh it out with AI, then make a presentation. That could save you hours. And so, I think we'll see a lot of encouraging in that.
Yeah.
And so, at least for now, there'll be the kind of business era tools, some specialty tools, and there's certainly software tools. And we encourage our workforce to do that, but within the framework of kind of our regulatory environment relative to our customers.
Yeah.
Now, for more regulated customers in financial and healthcare, we clamp down that a bit more. For those who are, not so constrained, they can have more freedom, and we also try to bring that back up from the periphery of the company. We can't know everything from the top, so when you have 450 people working for you, you can learn from them.
One thing that I've seen very forward-looking from Leapfrog is the establishment of Center of Excellence. And as in when we work with a lot of organizations, that is something that we see needed for almost every organization. It might be big or small and in their own capacity, but then there probably has to be a unit that is actually focused on understanding the technology and seeing where we can implement it. Why did you build that inside Leapfrog in the first case, and what is there for other organizations to learn? Because that is something that I see very valuable that any company can do.
First of all, it's really early days of AI. So if you ask me this question in a year or 2 years, we'll probably have a slightly different shape to the answer. But I would say let's go back and look at something like 2000s. IT was really becoming very few companies had all of their website stuff figured out. So they had to create a new office, like the, chief information officer, something like this, right? A few places like banks would have that, but not every company. It wasn't necessary. And then it was like, okay, can we just have a business guy run the information officer? That turned out not to be the case. You needed someone who was grounded in IT practice and could make good hiring in these things. And the AI era, I think we will see something like that, and that's what we've done at Leapfrog and many other organizations. Because we're a developer-centric company, it's absolutely paramount. For other companies, it may be less critical to have a whole center of excellence, but certainly at least one or two people who really know this stuff, because some of the things in AI are profoundly strange and come from domain knowledge.
Yeah.
And so one example of that is, let's say you ask an AI of this current era, tell me about calculus, and it talks about derivatives and integrals and Green's theorem and all this stuff. And it's very articulate, and it's probably mostly correct. But then you apply some engineering problem, say, do this, and it tries to do calculus, and it cannot. Yeah. Okay, so, or it cannot do it at a level that you would expect. If you talk to a human on the street, an actual person who is that articulate about calculus, they know calculus. There is no chance that you can know all those things and not be a practitioner. But in the AI universe, you can run across LLMs
Yeah.
that can be verbally articulate about a subject and not competent about the subject. This leads to very weird cognitive dissonance because if you're a casual user or you're a business person, you're like, I can see that it knows these things. I can ask it questions. But then if you talk to a domain specialist, they're like, but the things it says are not appropriate.
Yeah.
So this is where your AI Center of Excellence comes in to help advise the business on where you can go and where you can't. So you don't have naive implementations. A lot of people complain there are a lot of failed AI deployments so far. I'd say it's early days. I'd say in a year or two, you're going to see very low hallucination rates. There are many techniques that are, driving that together. So again, your AI Center of Excellence or your AI expertise within the company can help with that. Now, in a larger organization like Leapfrog, where we are clearly having deep integration, not just of AI tools for people, but in the deployments for our customers, that's why we need those two tracks to really understand these things. And so we form a council. Now, in the case of Leapfrog, I was brought in to build that out because I come from a machine learning background and had used a lot of these tools. And then it's really more about people than about the technology, building that comfort with the team, making sure people are inquisitive, making sure they know they're heard. There was a great computer scientist, I think it was Alan Kay, he said, there are no computer problems, there are only people problems. And that kind of rings true here. The more we can get that expertise really institutionalized, the more people will deploy it effectively.
I think this really comes down to one thing that we've seen over the past 2.5 years. So when ChatGPT's GPT store started to come into place, it was a very clear signal for me as an individual that, okay, maybe there are maybe 10 million people around the world who are very close to AI. They know AI or have some exposure, but then this technology is going to touch maybe billions of people.
Sure.
And they have to cross the bridge to really understand this technology, what this technology is, where they can actually use it. And so that initiated our initiative of AI literacy, AI nativity, and we kept on pushing that for a year and a half. That's when I encountered my biggest blind spot of this entire process. And my blind spot was I assumed that technical people, when I say technical people, people who come from software background, AI research background, are keeping pace with the speed of generative AI, and are AI native is what my assumption was. Not really informed assumption, but then subconscious assumption.
Yeah.
That's when I encountered the first blind spot where this probably I started telling to myself that probably this is not true. I think AI researchers, software engineers, IT professionals maybe are not AI native by default, and probably there has to be some intentional changes in the workflows that they probably have to make. 1 year after that, I'm already at a position to say that, especially in larger organizations, somehow technical teams are becoming the biggest roadblock of AI adoption. And the reason I say that is because when a conversation of AI implementation hits the capability gap, then the first question, the first detour from there goes to it's risky. We don't understand it. We don't have data infrastructure that supports this kind of implementation. All of them very valid. But then I see tech teams very stifled and not being able to take that next step. Do you see this as a reality from your lens as well? And what we could do as what technical workforce could do to actually move in the direction of AI adoption in a non.
It's absolutely a thing. And, just because someone knows computer scientist or has been a programmer for many years doesn't make them proficient in AI or other domains as well.
Yeah.
So, I used to do a lot of work in embedded firmware. So basically for small machines and things. And I used to do some work in web software. And those two universes almost never, intersect. And I think for AI, there was a belief that it could be rapidly picked up because it's easy, but these edge cases around it are quite profound. So we talked about one of them, the kind of misappropriated knowledge. Then you have hallucination, which is it says something that's not really true, which is actually part of the AI system itself. The AI is always generating an answer. So the fact that the answer you get turns out to be useful is a probabilistic thing, not a recall thing, not like it looked it up in a book. But there are other edge cases that are problematic in AI for people who aren't really in it. So for example, In the database world, there's something called SQL injection.
Yeah.
And if you exposed your database and you let somebody just type in whatever words they want, they could input SQL commands and it would interact with your database inappropriately.
Yeah.
With prompt injection, it's the same thing with AI. You can ask the user, give me your first name and last name, but they could say, my first name is this and my last name is that, and then also delete the data or something like this. And if the AI is inappropriately wired, it will follow those commands. So prompt injection, unlike SQL injection, cannot be solved with a simple library. So in the SQL injection world, you would connect your database before that you have a pre-filter, an ORM, or some other kind of software technique that would just solve that problem. But here, the thing that makes AI useful and the instructions are all mixed together.
Yeah.
So it requires a really different mindset and training and deployment strategy. So from an engineering point of view, if you see and read about some of these things and you don't know how to solve them,
Yeah.
you're gonna throw the stop flag up to your requesters, your business side. It's like, look, there's all these security risks. There's, it doesn't always generate the right answer. And, for a lot of people who are on the technical side, whether it's software engineering or other things, even more so for civil or electrical engineering, you are paid to be right. You are paid to be correct. There is a right answer.
Yeah.
Buildings don't fall because civil engineers get it right. And in the IT world, you don't want to be blamed for crashes, downtime, and all these other bad things, data breaches. So that makes those guys much more cautious. And so some of them may not make the jump. As in every era of technology change, some people didn't make the jump. But the vast majority will. They will say, oh, okay. But they will need to be given time to re-educate. And so whether it's like the AI COE that we talked about before, or other journeys to help them make that'll be appropriate. But it's also important to listen to them because there will be many naive implementations that will expose companies to inappropriate risk because they pushed too hard on a team that wasn't ready. So make a long answer longer, there's going to be a large technical education component. And the other thing is, even for those who did a lot of machine learning, recommendation engines and computer vision, those things, that's actually really different psychologically than generative AI.
Yes.
Those guys are used to building data sets and confusion tables and all this stuff. That's not the same psychology and mindset of a developer making an application where an LLM answers questions and then takes action.
Now, a couple of realities. One, the pace in which generative AI is moving, how things are getting better. The other is the capability gap, even from a technical lens. And then we have the broader ecosystem, which is feeding talent into the companies. And then the government, as such, here in the country wants to produce 5,000 AI graduates over the next few years. What do you think a college that is doing technical education, teaching people AI, running courses around it, should be looking at right now in Nepal so that they can prepare talent that can actually be very valuable for companies like Leapfrog?
So this is a difficult question. I'm not sure where this goes. And that's not actually Nepal. It's actually the whole world is facing this problem at the same time. If you are, let's say 18 years old, 17 years old, you're about to go into university. What should you study? You see like, coding careers are going away. Maybe I shouldn't study that. Other people will say things like, well, if you just lean into all the AI tools, you know how to use AI tools, then you can graduate with some, knowledge of using all these coding tools and you will be a senior developer coming out of university.
Yeah.
I don't think either of those are really true. And it would apply to other disciplines as well. The first thing is that right now, people who are using coding tools are already very experienced software engineers. Maybe they need to get up to speed on how the coding tools work, but they know how to write code, deploy it to web services, Amazon, Microsoft. And so when they ask the coding tool to do something, they can still get a real feel of what it's doing. If you never get that grounding, you will have no way to control what's actually happening underneath. So the first thing is to kind of, for our younger people, make sure that they really have to do it. It means math, it means basic programming, it means data structures, these kinds of things. You must, even assembly language. It's not that you'll ever use assembly language, but you will understand how the computer works, which means you understand the kinds of things and scale of problems that the computer must do. So yeah, I think it's a challenge for, what to teach universities. You look at somebody who's 17, 18, 19, going to 20. I think the first thing is they must know their fundamentals really well.
Mhm.
There is some mode that it's like, well, they just need to learn the AI, lean into all the tools, become one with all of those, and then they can become good in the workforce. But fundamentally, you need to know your craft.
Mhm.
So, I would say for 17, 8-year-olds, 19-year-olds, become good at math, become good at basic computer engineering, data structures, operating systems, even assembly language,
Yeah.
because these teach you what's actually happening. This is how the basic computers work, how they're tied together, how they're networked, these kinds of things. Then when you use the AI tools, yes, perhaps in the future, you don't need to hand code all these
Mhm.
things. Python is the new assembly language.
Yeah.
The product spec or the PRD is the new code.
Yeah.
But that code can be translated in so many different ways. And if you don't understand the underlying techniques, you won't be as effective at delivering solutions,
Yeah.
even within AI. And that's true for other crafts as well. If you're going to become deep into accounting, sure, you don't need to manually enter every person's tax pieces and receipts into the computer. An AI will do that for you. But there might be deeper things about larger accounting, especially at the corporate level,
Yeah.
that are much more strategic. But if you don't know that basics, then trusting AI to do it will not make you competitive.
Yeah.
So those things I think are true. I think what will software coding become? It's going to be different in some ways. One is it's true that a small team of developers can do things that a much larger team would have done in the past
Yeah.
because whole swaths of boilerplate can be done by AI. You can make whole software stacks and deploy them in the cloud with one or two engineers if they know what they're doing. The other thing is you're going to need to get good, especially in software engineering, at proofreading AI code. Now, if the AI generates tens of thousands of lines of code, you are not going to read that.
Yeah.
Candidly, even if it generates hundreds of lines of code, eventually you're not going to read that either because you're just going to say, okay, it works so often, like, why am I doing that? But you're going to have to deal with what happens when it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So before you deploy it to production, you're going to need to invest in your how do I make sure AI is actually doing what I intended? And so things like tests, uh, code coverage. Before we might say code coverage of 85% is good because somebody's reviewed all that code. Now nobody's reviewing that code. So maybe we need 100% coverage. And so your old school tools will help you audit your new school AI.
Mhm.
So these are newer ways of thinking. You just wouldn't do that. It would be too expensive to have humans write all those tests.
Yeah.
But now with AI, you can do that, and you might have to do that.
Yeah.
So there will be new techniques that kids need to learn, and there will be new techniques for professionals to learn as well. But that said, things are going to change. It will take less people to do the same things in many of these digital industries. And so I do think one of the trends is we'll see more entrepreneurialism
Mhm.
across the world. And to some degree, for larger countries, the U.S. and China and those things where they've built huge people machines of countries, companies, that will be a challenge. Why do we have so many people?
Mhm.
Whereas in smaller countries or in people who are more entrepreneurial, like, wow, look at what I can do by myself. So that picture is changing, but what it does for everyone will level the playing field in some ways and make it uneven in others.
One thing that in my lens is a critical factor in this entire process is that colleges are educating a workforce for, let's say, 3 to 4 years. In that process, the critical point that is breaking right now is assessments. What they are asking students to submit, and then what students are submitting. Out of the outputs of generative AI, and then the colleges or education institute not having found a way to really understand how real capability could be measured. Now, one of the things that we are looking at from a research point of view is the idea of epistemic debt. And as you mentioned, it is 100 lines of code. I don't need to understand what's written over there, but then I need to be able to understand if it breaks. So we see that kind of epistemic debt increasing across organizations as well, and also in academia. How do you what should colleges or education institute assess in their students so that they can actually build real capability that is very valuable in today's world?
It's really, I'm not really sure yet. I think we've seen a lot of trends in education in the past few years, even before AI, like oh, maybe we don't need so much testing. In the US, we would have the SAT and the PSAT and some of the graduate exams, and then the colleges went away from those. And now they're coming back because at the end of the day, testing is part of life,
Yeah.
especially if you're in the professional sciences like engineering or medicine or things like that. I mean, you will be tested a lot, and you need to be Johnny on your feet when you're doing it. So I think colleges need to lean into some of that testing.
Okay.
Yes, students will be intimidated and they'll protest, but that needs to be there. And a lot of those tests are going to have to be things like writing and doing things in person, because obviously the things that are done offline can be done by tools.
Yeah.
And testing that's done offline will be assisted by tools.
Yeah.
And, when I used to hire younger engineers out of college and even now, some of them would come from an academic mindset, they can't look things up on the internet or what happens if they do. And my position is you're not in school anymore. Now you get to use all those
Yeah.
tools.
Yeah.
But when you're in college, you can use those tools because they're tempting and they save you time. And you can, whether they're cheating or not cheating, you're not learning the craft. So for those people who are serious, need to learn the craft. For institutions, I would say there's a slightly different problem. Institutions get good at issuing degrees, but not always professional credentials. So a lot of people graduate, they get a CS degree, and then they go to work for their first company, and they get retrained by the company how you really do it.
Yeah.
And so I think, and there's a lot of pressure, especially in the US, on the higher, more expensive Ivy League education about how much it costs. So, and I imagine that's true in other countries as well. I think there's going to be a push more towards what I call professional school. Like make sure that the person who graduates can really, do that. And so if the institution is on the hook for making sure that person really knows their craft, they'll find ways to make sure they really know their craft. If they can just give a degree and then the guy's on their own, then you'll see an open loop and it won't work out as well.
Okay. Okay. I want to now go a bit into your past experience because there has been two exits for you building tech companies at different times. How do you see that now? What kind of learnings we could actually take from those kind of those kind of experiences, and what probably doesn't really apply in today's time in terms of how we go about building those kind of companies?
So I sold a company called LampDesk in 2007. It created a product called WebVM, Web Virtual Machine, which after our acquisition by Palm got morphed into something called WebOS. And WebOS was launched in all the Palm products, and then eventually into HP products. And then there was a bunch of stuff at HP, and now LG Television is still
Okay.
WebOS. So it was a really different era. There was a couple of us, we started it. We were looking at how to make JavaScript run applications anywhere on web, mobile, Linux, Windows, whatever. Um, I think that was kind of a very classic Silicon Valley kind of story. Another company called Trenzent was more cloud software computing. It was in the mid 2010s. It sold in 2018. I think it was also a very similar thing now. One of the things that was clear in both those times is that it was kind of following, I'll say, the Silicon Valley playbook.
Mhm.
A couple of guys start a company, they try to get some customers, they build a tech, sometimes they attract funding. Um, Here, that part's not changed. Part of it's the psychology of being an entrepreneur. Are you comfortable being out on your own? And then part of it is different. Um, Now you can use tools to help you incorporate. You can use tools to help do all of the accounting. You can use tools to do coding. You can have tools to do the deployment.
Mhm.
So this is a superpower. So you'll see more entrepreneurship now
Yeah.
because you can do things with one or two people. If you were a non-technical person, you had to go find that technical person, and it would be hard to assess that technical talent.
Yeah.
I was a technical person. My other co-founders were technical people. So that wasn't a gap. We had a business gap for sure. But now I think this opens it up to business people or non-technical people can try things out.
Yeah.
That's a huge boon.
Mhm.
So that's where I see the primary change thing. Ironically, I think for technical people who are usually maybe less social, especially kind of entrepreneurism, and not that they're not social or well-adjusted, it's just more of putting yourself out there, crafting a story. These are things that, used to be blockers for them and might still be blockers for
Yeah.
them relative to their business cohorts.
Okay. And let's say, for example, we are in Nepal right now, and anyone, let's say, for example, in any of the campuses here, what would you say to let's say a 18 to 20-year-old here in Nepal, who is wanting to build something in technology? How should they be looking at this entire scenario? What should they be focusing on? Because in the West, we have started to see a new trend in which YC is starting to go to colleges and then asking recruiting people a lot more earlier and then asking them to finish college and then join YC and then build the startups. So we don't have an ecosystem here that is so mature. But then how could entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, could still take advantage of that opportunity that we have here from your lens?
So I think YC and a few other places, there's kind of a fight going on in the American politics spectrum about college and what college is for, and the politics of left and right political spectrum. And so there's kind of like, maybe college was overkill or you don't need it. And so we see these kind of people poaching it. But those people who don't finish college, if they don't catch on that ride that YC takes them, might find themselves quite disadvantaged later. So I'm not always sure that services them.
Yeah,
And if you catch somebody very young, 18, 19, and you pull them into a program like that, for sure, bright people will learn,
yeah,
but others might just be taken advantage of
yeah,
because they're kind of exploited. So I think that it's great to have young people. We have some young people on our staff who are, barely out of college or in college, and they're doing well. Um, but I think the important is that the colleges need to be held accountable for getting value.
yeah,
Now, for the young people, um, go to meetups,
mhm,
go meet with other people.
yeah,
I'm sure all around here we have little pockets of, you know, groups that are, meeting and somebody's giving a small talk in front of 10 people and and you get to get real hands-on connection. And with that, just like now as it was 10 years ago, as it was 20 years ago, you get mentors. You get to ride with someone else. Maybe you can do part-time with someone else. And you can learn and see what happens.
yeah,
And a lot of what you're going to learn, especially as a young person, is more business oriented than technical. The technical stuff you can read about. You can see the YouTube demos of. The business stuff, when you're in front of a customer, when you have to spin a story on the spot, you're online and you have to adjust.
yeah. We're at a time when, like, if I see from my lens, I'm starting to see tremendous amount of value of high quality education and high quality universities in the time that we are moving forward. But there is an incredibly large area of education that is not happening at a high octane level, and then in a world where entrepreneurialism is increasing, skills is getting more and more traction. You need to have your skills. How do you think mass education at scale, because you mentioned if people are not bright enough and then they are dropping out of college at 18, 19, they might not be so advantaged moving forward, but then there is not a very robust educational ecosystem or infrastructure that is there in the world that can actually support skills in the future. So how do you see that transition happening for colleges that are not the top tier colleges in the world, and obviously here in Nepal as well?
So, ironically, I was having some of this discussion with some friends in the States. And, there's all this debate about how valuable college is or how expensive college is or what can a college graduate really do if they have to get retrained when they get to their job anyway. And maybe the answer is graduate school. And then for some people, if you're going to be in material science or you're going to be in electrophysics, graduate school is obvious. But I would kind of look at it a different way.
Yeah.
And I think it's a rewiring of the college system as we know it today. To some degree, the college system is open loop. The colleges graduate people, and they're not held accountable if those people don't deploy into the workforce. It's kind of on those people's, your problem to get a job,
Yeah.
right? Your problem to pay back your debts. So that's one piece. Another piece is people at different stages of their life
Yeah.
will need to reskill. If you're 35, if you're 45, if you're 55, college is in the rearview mirror. Even
Yeah.
trade school is in the rearview mirror. Maybe
Yeah.
you need to get a new skill.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be 4 years of college when you're 55 years old. So I think that we need a new paradigm in education, which is there are sets of skills which are like 1 year or 6 month,
Yeah.
1 year, 2 year, 4 year. We have these. We have associate degrees. We have certificates, but sometimes they're poo-pooed on. Oh, you only went to associate degree,
Yeah.
and that's not true. Like that's a valuable skill. It does something society needs. So if we can have more of these levels of 6 month, 1 year, 2 year kind of programs, in addition to traditional college and graduate school, people can get back on the on ramp later. Maybe at 20 years old, you had a kid, then you had to do some other things. Now you're 30 years old and you can re-enter. But guess what? Who's going to hire you, right? If you have a 2-year degree option and maybe there's some alignment with the state, that's true in the Western countries as it is in the Eastern countries, to help get you back on the train, you can jump back on and be part of the workforce. And it brings self-pride. So I feel that education is primed for two changes. One is this multi-tier on-ramp, and the other one is accountability for the outcome. In the States, there's more of a political issue about degrees that are not directly employable, like art history or certain kinds of studies. I don't want to take a place on what's valuable or not. Education and knowledge is always valuable, but colleges need to be on the hook, and other schools as well, for helping make sure that they are actively participating in the employment structure.
Okay, that makes sense. I think that makes sense for a lot of education institutes to be investing time and energy in that direction, because I think there's going to be a larger addressable market for them to be building these kind of curriculums and then serving the workforce as well.
That's right. And so, do you need to go to 4 years and become a computer science AI certified engineer? Or maybe you're already partly through that, or you're already an engineer, or maybe you're a policeman and you're like, okay, you know what? I can take a 1 year, become AI competent, and I can help a certain class of problems. And if that doesn't work out, it's only 6 months or a year to me get another, education, and this is hugely valuable. This is how a large class of people can be brought up together.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know of the recent interaction that you have had with the policy that the government has come up with, and there's been some recommendation that you have sent as well. When you see from a lens of Leapfrog, which is a very large company here in Nepal, how do you see the policy? What we could do differently from a government's lens in that scenario?
So firstly, I think it's great that Nepal government is making a policy for the country to help, have uniform AI adoption, think about different issues in AI, like the humanistic elements. Is AI providing good for the population? Is AI protecting privacy, or at least private data, like healthcare data? But there are other pieces that are, I think, important to consider. One is you can't have a policy for a small country that does not directly reference, maybe not by name, the large superpowers. It is a fact that at this moment in time, and probably for the next few years, the USA and China are the dominant providers of language models. So you can't have a policy that doesn't think about what that means. Do we need Nepal language models? Do we need to look more closely at the regulatory environments in those two countries so that we're not left behind? And that kind of delves into a second thing, which is I believe firmly in regulation as long as regulation is tied to mitigating some threat or harm to people. So every regulation that gets written for any country in any place should be directly tied to the goal of protecting from this, whatever that is. So we have regulations on ladders so that people don't fall. We have regulations on buildings so they don't crumble. But you can go too far, or if the regulations are too, like, this seems reasonable, they're not tied to a direct failure case, then you get regulatory grift. And so I think Europe has a lot of wonderful humanistic regulations, and GDPR and things are very protective of private data. But I would also say, sadly, if you look at AI in the world, Europe's economy by size is about the same as the US and China, roughly, right? And it's not a player in the AI model space. So there's something missing in the European environment. Plenty of smart people, very well educated. What's happening there? You list the number one companies in the world for AI, you're going to go Anthropic, ChatGPT from OpenAI, Google. You're going to go to China, you say DeepSeek and Quen and all these guys. You go to Europe and you're like Mistral, and then what? So what's missing there? I don't know the answer. Maybe it's something else. But for a small company or a small country like Nepal, it's like, let's study where regulation is effective and where it's not. And the last piece is that unlike some other technologies, let's say airplanes took a long time to build out. But if you look at the first airplane, the Wright brothers airplane, I mean, it could go 600 feet. And so, and if you crashed it, you were in trouble, not the world. AI is very interconnected. So some of the risks you introduce are not just whatever your own experiments are or your company's experiments. They might affect millions of other people.
Yeah.
So whether it's Nepal or whether it's other countries, how do we make sure that we don't have triggers for much larger experiments that go awry?
I think you touched on a very important point that I have been having conversation with, especially with government people, is around how do we need to look at the language models and where they're coming out from, and how are we using it. Maybe we could get into a bit more details on how should government look at it. Let's say there are government professionals who are using different AI tools, of course. But then when you look at the larger spectrum of nation, with government offices using these models, banks using these models, private sector organization using these models, how should we look at from a policy point of view, from a risk point of view, and also from a narrative point of view, right? Because at the end of it is a language model. It will communicate, though probabilistic, it will communicate things in a certain way. So how should the government look at that?
So different countries have taken different positions on this. Like I think in the Swiss, they have national models. In the case of the US and China, they just have, well, it's in the US, it's all private sector. And in China, it's kind of a mixed situation because Chinese government is very interconnected with its companies. For Nepal, I think you're going to have to rely on a lot of business agreements because the technology changes so rapidly, and the amount of money it takes to make a model, to own it, and to keep it up to date is probably prohibitive. So probably that's going to look more like partnership, and a lot of that's going to be private partnership. But there are other pieces of the AI ecosystem where I think Nepal is going to want to own things. Perhaps some models that are very good at Nepali and English translation and other things like that. And also for if there are problems with AI in the future, that you can run models in the country, that they can be hosted in the country. Maybe you want to make policies that Nepali citizen data doesn't leave the country. Other countries already have this. Europe already has this. Um, and I think that's a good thing. And so then it's like, okay, well, building data centers and storage in a country is very expensive. But Nepal, and this is not new, I mean, it has huge assets of hydropower and land. So, maybe there's an opportunity to partner with some of the big hyperscalers and really build out some data centers and power. Nepal already is a net exporter of energy. So that Nepal can host some of those things here and mandate that, yes, a private company can build things here, but there are things that Nepal requires that help support Nepali ecosystem, Nepali ownership of data, especially for citizens, and also provide some redundancy in case weird stuff happens in the world geopolitically, and now you're not stuck in certain ways.
Yeah, because as and when we are moving forward, we see a lot of organizations using a lot of these foundation models, and like if something like, but probably it won't, but then there is a chance that things will go south. And in the case of things going south, the country should not be so dependent on external models that the business logics inside the organization starts crumbling.
That's exactly right. And so I think that having systems that do not introduce those dependencies, and it's very hard to see what happens right now because you can bring on an LLM, you can use any of the frontier providers, they have crazy amounts of money for their redundant data centers in their parts of the world. So I think this is one where it's prohibitively cost for the Nepali government or the Nepali people to buy this stuff. But you can encourage a Microsoft or a Google or Amazon or whoever to build some of these things here. And as one of the caveats for that privilege, there's some things that go and retain with Nepal. I think every country has that right. Nepal is no different in that.
I think like as a country, we are entering a very transitionary period with elections coming in and with a lot of things happening. And there is this growing belief that, okay, there's a resource constrained environment, and it is not that we have incredibly large amount of money to pour into everything. So when we come to focus areas and what we should be focusing on from a technological adoption or infrastructure building process, if you had to recommend the government that is going to form or the government, the people who are contesting to be in the government, what is the lens you would look at it, and what would you tell them?
I think that because of the huge energy resource that Nepal has, that puts it in a unique place almost relative to many, many other countries in the world. I understand it's underdeveloped, but with outside dollars, it could be developed. And if you look in the US at the speed and the sheer, I mean, hundreds of billions of dollars are being put into data centers across the country. The US is a huge country land-wise. It has huge amounts of flat arable land, which is a unique advantage for the US. So it's easy to build stuff, but actually powering the stuff is difficult. So now they're talking about making nuclear reactors times many, many. And that's an expensive prospect. Nepal doesn't need to build nuclear reactors. So there'll be some new projects. And I think, again, Nepal could encourage outside dollars to make data centers, and there'll be carrots, so you can use these data centers to serve nearby countries, just like nearby data centers serve Nepal. But then the caveat is that some of those have to serve Nepali interests. So in the US, we would kind of have a tax rebate system. Nepal would have a similar kind of trade-offs.
Yeah, because like we find ourselves in a very unique scenario where there is a lot of transition and there's a great opportunity of AI, and I think that's where we could really do something, build infrastructure and really speed run this opportunity. There could be so much more that we could explore. This just in the interest of time. Just the final piece is around the technological people inside the inside Nepal. How should we look at the tech community, because you interacted with them in the AI conf, and then in meetings with different Leapfrog connection. I think that there has been a lot of interaction. Now, how should the tech community of Nepal looking at for what should we look at for in 2026? What do you think should be the focus areas? What are things that we should probably not do? Anything on those lines?
I think there's a couple of things. One is, as a small country, it's always difficult to have a pulse on the larger thing, especially once we get away from maybe the top 50 people who are really in AI and they're traveling. What's the next 1,000 people look like? Those people need to get out of the country more so they can bring that back to the country. Otherwise, you will look at things with a local lens. And with AI, it's a global trend. So really critical to invest in getting Nepalis in and out to China, to Europe, to Americas, and touching all these places so that they come back and help build that infrastructure with a really informed piece. I think the second thing is to really woo at least one or two hyperscalers, private players, who can help fund this. It will be magnitudes of different capital, and they have skill and expertise, but under a Nepali umbrella. So those are the two areas where my guess would be really important, because otherwise you'll be constrained by local resources, especially monetarily. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, that's a constraint. So how do you get around that constraint?
Let's see again the opportunity, and then we could obviously have those conversations with hyperscalers. But then when you look at from the hyperscalers lens, when you look at volatility, so there is an opportunity lens, but there is a volatility lens as well.
That's right.
Is there a possibility for us to balance that? Do you see that as a possibility, or probably the system here has to be stable for hyperscalers to really trust the political environment here as well?
Well, it'll be interesting to talk to people who are leading at least the expansion units in many of those players, right? But we can say it was instability. There was a revolution in September, but we can also say not a lot really changed in the infrastructure of the country. Right? It's not like everything melted down and then all the assets were lost and everything. That did not happen. And as long as that doesn't happen, and Nepal can maintain organizational and stability and civil stability, I think, hyperscalers and other large companies deploy across the world in all kinds of countries that have much less stability than Nepal. So you can't ignore it, but I don't think that they would be reticent as long as that can be true.
If we are to take the case to any of these hyperscalers, apart from us being a energy exporter as a country, top three things that could really sell Nepal to the hyperscalers and really attract attention, from your lens, what do you see those?
Well, I think for the first one to come in, that gives them an advantage. And if you look at other technologies that people have deployed, whether they're cars or other pieces of, industries that require a lot of capital investment, they can be generational, they can last a long time. So I think part of that is just saying, this is that moment in the AI space.
Yeah.
Other pieces, I'm not as much on the infrastructure side. I think that with, consistency and persistence,
Yeah.
both,
Yeah.
that kind of thing can happen. And that combined with, really investing in the workforce, kind of all those different tiers of education.
Yeah.
So, we are invested in growing a very skilled workforce.
Yeah.
And, this can be a center.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. We could have done a lot more longer version of it because there is so much of wisdom that the ecosystem could benefit for. But thank you so much for your time, and hopefully you enjoyed it as well.
My pleasure. Really great to talk, and
Yeah.
happy to talk again. So let's plan on that.
Thank you so much.